I know it's been a really long time since I've been able to upload a video. I recently had my computer decided it wants to break on me, and I finally got it fixed. And what a better time for it to get fixed than for it to be the day that Sony decides to drop lots of information about their next-gen PlayStation. So before we get into all the information that they dropped, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance. I've been sick ever since the weather started to get cold, so I sound really congested. Hopefully it will be better by the next time I upload a video, but thanks for sticking with me even though I'm sick as a dog. Wired.com got an exclusive interview with Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Jim Ryan, as well as system architect Mike Cerny, about new information about the PlayStation 5. Yes, that is the official name of Sony's next-gen system, which is to no one's surprise. Also, before I go any further, all the information from today's video is from Wired.com, which I'll have a link to that in the description. So yeah, the first big piece of news from this is that the next system is called the PlayStation 5, and it will be launching next holiday 2020, roughly around the same time as Xbox's Project Scarlet. One of the big advantages about the PlayStation 5 and even the Xbox Scarlet is the transition from going from a typical hard drive to a SSD, which means that games are going to be able to load much faster than they were on previous gen systems. And as far as overall system performance goes, everything is going to load faster. So like your system UI and loading into games and downloading games is all going to be a lot faster than last gen. One of the biggest improvements over this next generation as far as graphical performance goes in games compared to last gen is the support of ray tracing, which is basically a lot of lighting and sound enhancements in games. And this is a system-wide feature, it's not based off of software. Also, another bit of news that came out of this is that for the first time ever in a PlayStation system, the PlayStation 5 is going to support 4K Blu-ray playback. Now, I know what you're thinking. The PlayStation 4 Pro was able to do 4K video game playback, but yes, it could not do 4K Blu-ray media playback, which the only system currently that can do that is the Xbox One X. Don't ask me why, it doesn't make any sense to me either. But alongside that, all of the PS5 games are going to be on 100GB Blu-ray discs. Now, that sounds awesome, but basically these discs are going to be made for just holding the games, and they're going to have to all install onto the PS5's SSD because an SSD can load data faster than any kind of optical drive that's out there right now. One of the really interesting things that I didn't actually know about how this worked is that when reading a game like Marvel's Spider-Man off of a hard drive, there are certain bits of information that are duplicated up to 400 times, which takes up a lot of data. So using an SSD can actually minimize the amount of data required per game. So I don't have exact numbers on this, but you can imagine, for instance, maybe a 60GB game, which the only one I can think on top of my head is Black Ops 4. Maybe could drop down to maybe about 40GB by not having to duplicate all of the data. It could be a lot more than that too, but it also could be kind of less, but I would imagine it's probably about a 10 to 20 gig difference maybe. But speaking of games like Call of Duty Black Ops 4, one of the other things that they're shooting for with the PlayStation 5 is the ability for the player to only install specific parts of games that they want to play. So if you're a die-hard multiplayer Call of Duty fan and you don't play campaign, you would have the option to just say, I don't want to install the campaign, just put multiplayer or horde mode like zombies in there instead. Or if you wanted to play campaign, once you play the campaign, you can go back and uninstall the game. Now that is something that's specific to the developer, but the option is going to be out there for anyone who wants to take part in that. This is a feature similar to what Halo the Master Chief Collection does on the Xbox One, which allows you to choose which parts of the campaign or multiplayer out of the 4 games that are on the disc, which ones you want to play. So like if you wanted to only play Halo 2 multiplayer, but you didn't want to play 3 or 4, and you didn't want their campaigns, you could just choose not to install those and only have Halo 2 multiplayer in there. So it's a system similar to that. Next up is information about the new system UI for the PlayStation 5, which they do mention how sometimes the PS4's system is really clunky and really slow. I thought maybe when I bought a PS4 Pro that I wouldn't run into those problems, but I actually feel like they got worse on the Pro than they did on the regular one. So on top of being able to a more simplified UI that's going to work a lot faster, so basically the next big thing is that the PlayStation 5 is going to allow you to look into a game without actually having to boot it up. Multiplayer game servers will provide the console with a set of joinable activities in real time. Single player games will provide information like what missions you could do and what rewards you might receive for completing them, all without actually having to boot up the game. This is all information that's going to be given to the player directly from the home screen. Wired also got a look at the new PS5 controller, and one of the big features about it is it's going to have adaptive triggers, which the closest thing right now that you could see to it is something like the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch, which have that, they call it HD Rumble, which basically is just more precise motors. They give you better feedback whenever you're doing stuff. So one of my favorite examples, whenever the Switch came out, there was a game called 1-2 Switch that had the ability, whenever you like tilted it, you could feel like marbles like rotating inside of it. Or when you're unwinding the treasure chest in that game, you could actually feel like the chain was being pulled off of the Joy-Con. It's very awesome in practice, and I can't wait to see what a lot of developers do with that. And one of the examples that they give is whenever you are shooting a bow and arrow, like at the beginning of it, it feels really easy to pull it back, but the farther you draw the bow back, the harder it feels like it is to pull the trigger down. And just to replicate that feeling of actually drawing back a bow. Or whenever you're driving in a racing game and you're driving on like grass instead of the track, it feels like it's harder to drive on there because it almost feels like you're having to put more force down on the trigger. Just things like that. They're more like quality of life improvements to kind of make the games feel more realistic. Also, one of the last big features that they announced for the PS5 controller, feels like it should have come in this generation but it didn't, is that the controller is going to have USB Type-C charging. The Nintendo Switch Pro controller was the first controller on the market to be able to have USB-C charging, and it feels like it's long overdue for any major game console controller to have it. And with that also comes a much larger battery, and with using USB Type-C, that means that it's actually going to be able to charge the controllers faster than micro USB. And finally, I will never have to own a micro USB cable ever again because everything in my house will be USB Type-C. Also, last little tidbit, product manager Toshi Aoki, I hope that's how you say his last name. Oh, and in his interview, he said that with the larger capacity battery and haptic motors make the new controller a bit heavier, but it's still lighter than the Xbox One controller with batteries in it. Which, to me, an Xbox One controller isn't really that heavy to begin with, but it is significantly heavier than a PlayStation 4 controller. So maybe the PS5 controller is going to have a really balanced weight to it, which I feel like is going to be something I'm going to be really interested in. And finally, they did have some interviews with game developers about what they're currently doing with PlayStation 5 dev kits. Marco Thrush, who's the president of Bluepoint Games, says that they are working on a really big title for the PlayStation 5. In the past, they are known for making games such as the remake of Shadow of the Colossus, which is leaving it up in the air of whether or not they are going to be remaking another old PlayStation game or if they're making a new game altogether. Anyways, that's about all the information we got about the PlayStation 5 today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a thumbs up. Let me know what you think about it. And if you really enjoyed it, go ahead and subscribe. If you didn't like it, go ahead and tell me what you didn't like about it. And also, just a quick side note, you can now play PS4 games from your Android device or iPhone through Remote Play. If you want to see a video on how to do that, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.